My friend Cheryl Dunn is here visiting me in my office right now. And
I need to hear.
Cheryl is an incredible person. I was going to say an incredible photographer, filmmaker, but no, I'll say incredible person first, as well as being an amazing photographer, filmmaker. I met Cheryl like probably, when did we meet, Cheryl?
90s.
In the 90s.
I believe you met me when I was shooting Runway.
Okay, so Cheryl was shooting for paper, and then also there was this scene simultaneously that was kind of exploding with Aaron Rose and these artists that were kind of like super interesting scene that was happening in California and in New York, but it had to do with skater culture a little bit, and it had to do with, it was kind of like
Graffiti.
the next era post hip hop. There was a thread there, and it was like hip hop came from, you know, the South Bronx, and it was inspired by music, whereas the skater movement was inspired by sport, and it was by skate and surf. So there were these movements, and they were cultural movements also. So by that I mean there was art component, there was a style component, there was to both hip hop and, you know, hip hop was the first one, and that was really in the 80s and the late 70s. It was just a different movement, but it had all the elements to it. There was a lot of artists, and there was a whole movement of sticker culture and of like people from, and it was started in LA, but then we started having it a little here in New York with Aaron Rose, who had a gallery called Alleged. And Aaron started having shows of a lot of these artists, more New York based. So meanwhile, the reason why this is leading back to Cheryl is because Cheryl was very involved in that culture and friends with all those artists. And it was before Dash Snow. This is like earlier. This is when, who? Name some of the artists.
Barry McGee.
Barry McGee, Margaret
Chris
Kilgallen,
Johansson,
Chris
Thomas.
Johansson. Yeah, so it was like the generation before Dash Snow. It was earlier. And I was also a big fan of all this art, and I was very interested in it. So Cheryl and I kind of became friends, right?
Uh-huh.
And we were also started collecting some of the art and skateboards.
I always tell my friends, go to your friends' shows, buy whatever you can,
Exactly.
buy a drawing, buy something,
And
support.
Cheryl was buying stuff, and I was buying stuff. Of course, you know, it was like everything was, they were all young, and it was, no one was famous.
Well, I think you know, it was more like you're such a proponent of always for 30, 40 years, like supporting artists and buying a drawing, and to me, and I kind of followed in your footsteps with this movement and also with creative growth. It was about genuinely loving something, getting it to help your friends keep making art, and because you loved it.
And Cheryl did this amazing film called Sped. That was my first film that I remember that you made that I loved. And it was really about a documentary about this culture, about different artists within this culture. And it was a wonderful movie. And it was your first documentary?
I just want to summarize how Sped came along and my involvement in that movement.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, I didn't really know skaters when I was growing up. They weren't in my town in New Jersey that I knew of, and graffiti writers. And when I started hanging out when Alleged would have shows, there would be 2,000 people on the street.
And Alleged is Aaron Rose's gallery that used to be in the Lower East Side.
On Ludlow Street.
And he showed a lot of amazing artists from that era.
Yeah, and I mean, his motivation was, there was such in skate culture, there was, these kids got connected through zines and competitions, and they would go to each other's town. I mean, you see a kid with, I've been made many movies now about skate kids, and you know, some guys like says, someone sees you on the street with a board, they know you're a skater, and they're like, you need a place to stay, and then they invite you over to their house to stay. So Aaron started this gallery really just like, well, let's put some of this art on the walls. This is the art that was in the magazines and in zines, and it just connected this web of kids that were involved young people that were involved in that, and
Yeah.
and then got to know each other and started a group. And it really came from the ground, because that's
Yeah.
skaters are on the street, graffiti writers are on the street. So these cultural movements are coming up from the bottom.
Yeah.
And then of course the top notices, and then they try to steal everybody. But
Yeah.
there was a moment where it was just like,
Yeah.
coalescing on the Lower East Side with these shows that thousands of kids would show up, and then the regular, art establishment was like, wow, that's exciting. What the hell's going on over there?
Yeah.
And then they started to pay attention to that. So SPED was a commission actually from a snowboard company called Original Sin, no longer around, obviously. Well, not obviously, but no longer around. And they would normally, these companies would make films about their riders, but
Yeah.
they had a number of these artists doing graphics for the boards, and
Yeah.
so I said, I want to make a film about the artists
Amazing.
that are making the graphics for the boards. So
Yeah,
it
okay.
became this, I pieced together this film with Mike Mills and Thomas Campbell and Phil Frost and Chris Johansson and like eight or so artists, Andy Jenkins.
Cheryl has a new film that seems to be coming out in the summer. Is that when you think it's
We're
coming
doing
out?
festivals now.
And I saw it, and it's amazing. And it's a documentary about Dash Snow, the artist, that she's been working on for many years. And what's that correct title of it?
Moments Like This Never Last.
Moments Like This Never Last, which is what came from Dash. What was that,
Right.
the name of his show or something?
That was his first solo show, the
Yeah.
title of his first solo show, and he had a big tattoo of it.
But the same, Cheryl's same moment. She was filming Dash when he was really young and just beginning, and she had a lot of footage. And this film really didn't start happening until like 4 years ago or something, or what?
Well, when he passed away, there was discussion, and I knew from the Beautiful Losers experience, you have to protect stories.
Yeah.
And he was quite notorious at the end of his life and internationally. So people were coming around New York and asking me and other people, hey, do you have any footage of Dash Snow? I'm going to make I got funding from the French government or whatever. We're like, who the hell are you? Did you even know
I
him?
hate that when that happens. You have to
So
protect
I was
it.
like, listen, we got to protect this story. Because the first film
That's
that
what
gets
I
in
want
the
to talk to you
world
about.
is the one that people think is the story. So
I mean, this is why I love Cheryl, is like, because I believe also it's really important to protect history, and it's to protect cultural history. And I feel like in a way, if you look at old papers, all the old papers, like I did that, cultural history of New York is in every issue of paper from when I started at my kitchen table. And Cheryl was always there documenting. You have to have a sense of what is history, because when it's happening in front of your eyes, you're sometimes too inside it, and especially when you're young. When you're really young and you're making it, sometimes the kids don't even realize. But it's really important to document and
but also to care for that archive. Organizing your archive is fucking sucks,
Yeah.
But it's like a garden. You have to maintain
Yeah.
it. It has to be cared for, and that's what you do with your history.
Yeah.
You know.
We both loved the photographer Mary Ellen Mark, who also incidentally was a neighbor, and she every day would walk around this park, Washington Square. I always saw her here, and we became friends because she loved my dog.
Yes,
And she loved dogs. And every year Mary Ellen Mark would have this Christmas party where you'd go and you'd get a picture of you and your dog. Did you ever go to one of them?
Yeah.
She was a wonderful woman. She passed away maybe 10 years ago. But anyway, she was an amazing photographer and documentarian. And but she would always, she inspired, I think, Cheryl and
Absolutely.
myself, about you have to be out there. You're not going to see anything if you're not out there. You really have to stay out on the street and
Yeah, she said, she was in my film Everybody's Street about New York City street photographers, and she said to me, many things, but you turn maybe you turn this corner and something amazing happens, and maybe you turn that corner and nothing happens. But if you're not out there, nothing's going to happen. And I always, that to me, street photography is like the most is really democratic, because in a city that's about privilege and who your father is and connections and all that stuff, when you're fighting your way to try to survive in this town and you don't come from connections or money, you're fucking starting down there, right?
Yep.
And when it comes to street photography, you can't will yourself to be good at that. You can't, it doesn't matter if you're rich, like you have to, it's democratic. You got to be out there and you got to put in the time, and that's the only way to get good at it. It doesn't matter. So I'm
one of my favorite
conflicted,
things that you've ever done was your film about street photography. Everybody's street.
We were editing that in my studio down in Financial District when Occupy Wall Street was happening, and we would hear the shit outside, and always protests are going down Broadway because City Hall's here, Occupy was here, so we'd just be like, had so much FOMO, so we'd go, okay, ready for a lap, and then we'd just like take a break and we'd do a lap, and we'd like go in the park, shoot pictures, and come back, and we're like, okay.
Oh my God, I love it.
We just, because it was maddening, because we just wanted to be outside the whole time. But
you're a documentarian, whether it's in film or it's in photos, and it's in.
I guess so, and I hope that. I'm seemingly, turning into a New York City historian like you.
Yes,
you're my,
historian.
you're my.
Yes, you are a historian. We are historians.
That in
We're
you.
bearing witness to this, and also as an old person, I always say, everybody makes fun of me, but the older you get, young people begin to become fascinated or in love with certain eras or certain decades or certain Jean-Michel or 80s or whatever, fashion. And it starts to morph, and you start to hear like people who weren't born yet describing things, and maybe like, and it was like, wait a minute, it's like not right.
Yeah.
So, we have to be the ones to bear witness to the truth.
Right.
We have to be the ones to document the truth, and for history's sake, because I don't really, and like that's what even this thing, in a way, is why I did my newspaper, to document what is this, because we don't even have a name for this. We don't even know what this is.
To me, that's the real emotional truth. A representation of trauma is through art.
Yes.
Not, you can watch media and you can watch big media, but there's agendas, and everyone has an agenda, but I think the emotional truth comes through art.
My reason why I did the New Now first was because I consider myself an artist, but I was like really frozen and couldn't produce. I'm writing a book. I couldn't do anything. And I was really giving myself a hard time about it. And I started asking other artist friends, and a lot of creative friends of mine were frozen also. And I realized it's because whatever now is so like ill-defined. We don't even know what is this. And that how can you make art or make anything if you don't even know where you're starting from? And that was my premise. And what Michael Stipe said when I talked to him in the interview, he said something that creative people don't just produce, you have to absorb and think. And
I think that, what you had asked your prior, I'm sorry, I forgot to say, the good things about it. And I was doing an interview about something about the pandemic, and I was like, artists, they write grants so they can go and do residencies so they can be uninterrupted and get in a zone and make work. And now all of New York City is an artist residency. Every city is an artist residency. And it's going to be, and and the work is coming out now, like the incredible music and incredible art, because everybody got to take a break and just reflect, think, and make work.
Has something really hit you that inspired you, that blew your mind?
People. New Yorkers. I mean, when as just like 9/11, but in a different way. Just how people came together and kind of stuck in there and didn't. I'm really moved by the New Yorkers that like stayed here and took care of each other, are taking care of each other.
Yeah.
That moves me beyond belief. Going to, we just went to Ricky Powell's memorial right over there.
Yeah.
Candles and, I mean, bottom line, the resilience of New York City and New Yorkers always inspires me beyond belief.
Same.
I remember going to a bar in Tribeca to watch the Yankees. They were in the playoffs, and it was like wooden walkways, and on every corner was a cop with a transistor radio listening to the game.
Yeah.
And it was just like, hey, what's up, man? Hey, what's up? It was like this connected, like positive something that we could all, think about for 1 second. But I just
and this
love
is like
that.
weird because it's not just New York. This is like every place.
Yeah.
And that's why, I mean, like people in LA are going through it too, but it's completely different from here, how we're going through it,
Yeah.
But and people in Paris, people in Germany, people everywhere in Asia. I mean, it's everywhere. So that's like such a amazingly unique. And New Yorkers are a certain type of animal. And now I think a lot of us, the hardcore, like original New Yorkers, have a sense of relief that the city has kind of become ours again. I feel now the city is mine again a little bit. And it's just, I think the city will attract artists again,
Right, I mean, I was not born in this town, but, and I don't think you need to be born in it to be a New Yorker. You read like Luc Sante or, stories about the artists in the 70s that came to, could in the late 80s or late 70s, 80s, where you could work some weird job like one day, make art 7 days a week, and go hear music, eat enough, and have and afford an apartment, you know, and that's why all that amazing art came out of those times, where then this town turned into just like untouchable for artists. And I know tons of kids that are like, wow, I can afford an apartment in Manhattan. And they're like, yeah, look at the prices. Because, those people that moved out are not going to come back for a while. So now is the time to come to this city, connect with the community, make art. I'm so psyched. I think it's going to be the best summer of all time.
Me too. I love it.
I can't wait.
Me too.
Yep.
Me too. Yeah, that's good. So that's exciting. And how are you doing, like, emotionally? How are you feeling?
I just keep busy. I just keep running.
Okay.
I don't dwell.
Your coping mechanism is to keep busy.
It's just like work my
not
face
stop.
off.
I mean, I am a crier. I don't know. I think a lot of people I know have like 2 or 3 crying jags a day. But then I'm fine.
Sometimes I go, why do I feel blue? And I'm like, well, if I didn't drink that half a bottle of wine. So then I don't drink for a day. I'm like, oh, okay, that's it. Okay, so good. I just work. And then when I'm burnt out, then I drink some wine.
Cheryl's amazing. Cheryl, you're such a special.
Thank you.
Jewel.
You are a New York treasure.
Well,
and I really respect everything that you've done for your whole entire career and everything all the artists that you recognize and bring up and introduce to the world like this and like you've done your whole career.
So now that you've finished the Dash movie, which is amazing, and it got like sold or something? What happens? I don't understand.
Yeah, we world premiered it at Doc NYC.
Yeah.
Even though it's virtual, they did
limit tickets. You can't see it now
sold
yet.
out twice.
So you can't see it anywhere now?
We have a bunch of festivals coming up in Europe and Australia, and we got a distributor.
And where's it going to premiere in the summer?
We're going to do theatrical in the summer when
and what does a theatrical premiere mean these days?
Means that hopefully you can physically go to.
Really?
a rooftop, maybe an outside type of theater we're trying to do, and then we try to get it on streaming services.
But the movie is really great. I mean, I saw it, and I loved it. It was really, really good.
Well, it has some connections to this time because that was a generation of young New Yorkers that that were early 20s, post 9/11, and what came out of that era of the vibe of this town, like the people making, nobody gave a shit about downtown New York. Everybody left. So the kids came in, made clubs, had did a dance marathon in a loft on Ann Street. People were making art, sculptures out of discarded things on the street. That really was cause and effect of like an environment, and what creativity comes from those events or those environments. And that was this generation post 9/11. And now we're going to have another generation to see what kind of art is made from these circumstances. So there's a connection there.
So did you know, I just want to say one last thing that I think is fun, is that in 103 years ago, in 1917, did you know that like 5 Greenwich Village artists broke into the Arch? Do you know this story?
Mm-mm.
Yeah, it's like an amazing story. And
broke into what?
The Arch. One of them saw that the door was open in the Washington Square Arch, so they made plans and they went at night and they brought like bottles of wine. One of them was Marcel Duchamp. But they broke into the Arch in the middle of the night, climbed to the top, drank like 5 bottles of wine. They started a little fire to keep themselves warm. And then they declared, they did this whole, like, they read poetry, but then they declared that they were declaring that Greenwich Village was going to be its own country. And they all signed it, and they had like pen and quill, and it was all old, And then one of the artists did this piece of artwork, a drawing, I guess, right? It's at the Met, supposedly. And, but that's a historical thing that happened. Isn't that amazing?
God, I didn't even know there was
They
a door.
declared Greenwich Village its own country, independent country. I love that. But, Washington Square Park, I live on Washington Square Park, and when COVID first happened, I was totally like, I was so freaked out. I didn't want, and no one was allowed in my building. Like, it was completely locked down. I couldn't even have my sister. I couldn't have anybody. So I started meeting people in the park in the spring, and I kept coming to the same place. I sit usually at that bench over there. And so I started meeting people because I was seeing people. I was so scared to see people. And they would come to the park and meet me. And then eventually my nephew, Max Rippon, made me this sign. I asked him to make me a sign, and he made me this sign. And Cheryl, you were the first meeting I had with the sign, right? I had a meeting with Cheryl with the sign. I had just gotten the sign. So that's when my office started. And as I started meeting people in my office, I call this is my office, I came up with the idea to do this newspaper, and I had all my meetings here. I met Milah. So this is like my park. So, and then Rickster, the photographer, died, and it was his park too. This park is, I feel it's really special, and I think it's really been special in the past year also with all the protests. And of course I live here, so I'm lazy. I'm saying this is my favorite park, but I feel lucky to live in this park.
No, it's stunning. It's stunning, and it's the center. It's just been the center of so many movements. Yeah. Throughout history, so. And
I love the idea of like people doing workarounds, like me having my office be outside, and then these guys, like I photographed these guys the other day. It was before it got really cold, but they do their exercises out here, like, and they have these like serious like kind of things that they hook up to this tree, and it's crazy. People like are doing like these crazy workarounds. I'm telling you here. They have like, I had my birthday party here. I had my book, my newspaper launch here. Yeah, this is my place. We don't sit in the corner and cry. We just figure it out. Exactly.
Adapt.
Figure it out. Work around.
Jerry rig stuff.
Jerry rig.
New
yeah,
ways.
very jerry rig. So
All
that's
right.
that's Cheryl. Thank you, Cheryl.
Thank you. These guys are freezing.